Undercover boss enjoys breakfast, freezes when waitress says she's giving up meals to feed her child. That morning, the sky looked as though it was draped in a gray cloth. There was no rain, but the crisp wind was enough to make people pull their collars up and walk a little faster. Beneath the pale light filtering through the dry branches on the outskirts of town, Michael Carterth, founding CEO of Sunrise Diner, pulled up in front of a small branch tucked along a quiet street. On paper, branch number 42 was still listed as efficient. Revenue reports were stable. Growth indicators showed no red flags, but an unusually high turnover rate and a slew of anonymous internal feedback had made it impossible for Michael to sit still. And as he had done time and again for over 2 decades, whenever he felt something was off, he came to see for himself. No luxury car, no bodyguards, no name tag, just a dark coat, a low hoodie, and the quiet footsteps of an ordinary customer. Inside, the restaurant was busy. Few empty tables. Orders were coming out steadily, but the atmosphere was oppressively heavy, not a chill from the weather, but from people. The staff moved as if performing a well-rehearsed play, no small talk, no smile lasting more than 2 seconds. Everything functioned like an old, worn machine that kept running only because no one had dared shut it off. Except one girl, Emma, her name printed faintly on a worn silver name tag. She was serving almost every table at the front of the restaurant, always the one taking orders, carrying trays, clearing tables, serving drinks, even restocking the napkin dispensers by the pastry counter. Emma was slender, her eyes shadowed by fatigue, yet she always wore a soft smile, the kind of smile worn by someone who had learned to hold on to kindness, even when the world around them hadn't been kind for a long time. Michael sat at a window-side table, picking a spot from which he could see the entire dining area. He didn't need much time to recognize something was very wrong here, and he didn't need an email or a financial flowchart to figure it out. All it took was one look at Emma's weary eye-san, the way she bowed slightly to thank an elderly customer, in a voice so soft he had to lean in to hear it. He knew he was in the right place, and this time, breakfast would be more than just eggs and toast. Michael remained at table number 6, near the window. He ordered a simple meal, soft-boiled eggs, toasted bread, and a black coffee. The same order he always chose when he needed time to observe without drawing attention. A while later, Emma appeared beside his table, tray slightly tilted in her hand, the warm scent of toasted bread still lingering in the air. She placed the meal down with the care of someone who'd been working far too long in silence. "Thank you," Michael said, his tone warm and friendly, just like any courteous customer. Emma gave a slight nod. The smile remained on her lips, but her eyes carried something that couldn't quite hide. Michael looked up, as if asking casually, "Have you had breakfast yet?" A light question, passing like a breath. But right at that moment, Emma paused for just a beat. Then she smiled. Not the kind of smile that comes from joy, but the kind of smile from someone who's learned to live with lack. She lowered her head, her voice so soft that he had to hold his breath to hear it. "I skipped it to save money for my son's food. As long as he's full when he goes to school, I can go hungry. No sobs, no complaints. Just a bare truth, wrapped in the gentle shell of a mother." Michael remained still. His hand rested on the side of the coffee cup, but his fingers tightened. He had once lived through mornings without meals, had once washed dishes for money, slept behind a kitchen to save on rent. He understood, but he never thought that within the system he had built with his own hands, someone would have to skip meals because they couldn't afford to eat even after working an entire morning shift. Emma's words were more than just an answer. They were a cry for help, carefully hidden behind a faint smile. A first signal of a deep fracture someone had tried to cover with a few pretty numbers on a report. Michael didn't respond. He just nodded, gently, as if to say thank you not for the breakfast, but for something far greater, the truth. And at that very moment, he knew this trip would not end with a report. It would end with change, or it would not end at all. The coffee cup on Michael's table was still half full, but he had stopped drinking long ago. His eyes, behind the rim of his glasses, followed every movement in the dinner, not like a customer waiting for his meal, but like a man tracing the clues that were never written in any report. Emma passed table number 5 with hurried steps, holding a tray with 3 plates of eggs and toast, yet still managed to lean slightly and nod politely to a customer pulling out a napkin near the window. She was serving almost the entire front section of the diner, taking orders, delivering food, clearing tables, refilling water, and occasionally quietly apologizing if an order was delayed. She didn't complain. She didn't get irritated. But something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Across from her, two male employees, Ryan and Jason, stood joking behind the counter. Their uniforms were crisp, hair neatly styled, hands free of dishes, only holding the POS machine. They almost exclusively handled the VIP tables. Regulars, big orders, generous tips. And every time a customer paid by Cardivan, if it was a table Emma had served, Ryan or Jason would immediately step in. Not discussion, not permission. Emma always stepped back, as if she had been taught to retreat or worse, had grown used to not receiving what she rightfully earned. Michael tightened his grip around the ceramic cup. Then he pulled out his phone and opened Sunrise's internal management app. Top-level access, dual authentication. The system loaded smooth and seamless, just like everything was assumed to be running. Dashboard branch number 28, pause access and update logs. Ryan L. R. Langford, full POS privileges. Jason M., secondary access, afternoon shift only. Emma W., no POS credentials assigned. Michael frowned. He navigated to the system patch log. Patch ID 6.1.4. Date applied 6 weeks ago. Description: optimize microtransaction handling during morning peak hours. Effect: all digital tips under $15 are automatically assigned to default ID. R. Langford. Approved by D. Hayes. D. Hayes. Doug Hayes, branch manager. The same man who once stood proudly at the quarterly HR summit, raising his hand to vow, at Sunrise, every drop of sweat will be recognized. And R. Langford? None other than Doug's nephew. A line of invisible code, a patch annotated as reasonable. A carefully built structure cloaked in a polished label. Optimization. Oh, but in truth, it was a mechanism silent, sophisticated, and parasitic, designed to drain fairness from within. Emma, no ID, no access, no appearance in the tip distribution report. She was a shadow, erased from the payout list as if she had never existed. Michael looked up. Emma was quickly wiping down table 3, bowing her head in thanks as a customer left, then heading back to the kitchen to pick up a new tray of pastries. Sweat glistened at her temples, but her steps remained steady, and he knew this wasn't a mistake, not a system error. It was a deliberate mechanism, a form of theft programmed, approved, and executed smoothly for weeks without a single person stopping it. But this morning, at table number 6, someone had finally listened. Michael didn't leave right away. He sat there for 20 more minutes to make sure what he saw wasn't a one-off, but a pattern in invisible system running on quiet logic. And every sign confirmed it. At 7:42, a young customer paid at table 4, a table Emma had served from the first glass of water to the final dessert. But just like every other time, as the customer reached for his wallet, Ryan appeared like clockwork, POS machine in hand, stiff smile in place, stepping in at just the right time, playing his well-rehearsed role. Michael glanced quickly at the management screen on his phone. The new transaction log popped up. Tip, $7.5, assigned to R. Langford. Emma hadn't even touched the transaction for her own service. She had no name, no recognition. And it didn't stop there. At 7:55, an older customer ordered an extra bowl of hot soup. Emma said she'd bring it out in a few minutes. But as soon as she turned away, Jason, who had been casually scrolling his phone the whole time, stepped in and offered, "I can get that to you faster from the counter, sir." Michael realized this wasn't just about taking the POS. They were actively hijacking the final order just to shift the transaction under their name, just to collect more tips. A subtle tactic. No yelling, no confrontation. Just soft footsteps, polite smiles, and tips quietly slipping away from the one who deserved them most. Michael set his phone down on the table, unable to hide the disappointment on his face. From the kitchen, Emma came out with a new tray. Her hands were still steady, but Michael noticed something different. There was a small bandage on her right wrist. It could have been a minor burn from carrying a hot tray, or simply the result of overexertion from working too many consecutive shifts. No one asked about it. No one mentioned it in any internal report. And he knew, if a system could ignore a visible wound, could erase someone's name from their rightful share, then that system was no longer one worth keeping. At that exact moment, Michael's phone vibrated softly. A message from Juliathi, head of human resources. Doug just approved an expense titled POS system maintenance at branch number 28. The note is vague. Do you want me to dig deeper? Michael didn't respond right away. He tapped lightly on the table, then looked toward the counter where Emma had just stepped aside once again to let Ryan use the POS system for the 8th time that morning. He picked up his phone and replied with a single sentence, No need to investigate. Assemble the audit team. I'll return Friday morning in my real capacity. Friday morning, 6:58 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but inside Sunrise Diner Branch number 28, the atmosphere was already heating up, though no one had touched the stove. The door swung open. Michael Carter stepped in. No hood, no old scarf half covering his face. This time, he came as himself, the CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group, the man who had just walked into a space that had hidden away shameful truths. Following him was Julia, head of HR, 2 audit specialists, and the lead systems technician for the POS network. No introductions were needed, no announcements. His presence alone brought the room to a standstill. Doug Hayes, the branch manager, peeked out from the office, a cup of coffee in hand, his face tightening the moment he met Michael's eyes. Ryan Langford, standing by the POS system, immediately looked down and instinctively set the device aside. Michael didn't look at anyone for the first few seconds. He walked straight to the register and signaled to Julia. She opened her laptop and connected it to a wireless speaker. Before you all begin your morning shift, Michael spoke calmly, I'd like everyone to take a step back. I won't ask anyone individually. I'll just present a truth. And then the recording played. Redirect tips under $15 to Ryan's ID. If Emma's doing the work, that's her problem for not having system access. Doug already approved it. No one checks small transactions anyway. Each word sliced through the air like a blade, quiet yet cutting deeply. Doug turned pale. Ryan took 2 steps back, his hands trembling, unsure of where to put them. Julia projected a backup log of the POS system onto the large screen. Patch ID 6,1, fear, auto redirect digital tips, 15, ID, Air Langford, approved by D. Hayes, date implemented 6 weeks ago. A few employees exhaled audibly. One murmured, I knew it. Doug swallowed hard, trying to force a smile. We just wanted to optimize the checkout process. Morning shifts are always rushed. Michael cut him off. His voice wasn't loud, but it struck with precise timing like a knock on a door, right when it matters most. You optimized it so your nephew would receive all the tips each shift. He paused, eyes shifting toward Emma, who stood quietly in the kitchen corner, still holding the water pitcher, while Emma skipped meals to feed her child. No one spoke. That's not optimization, Michael concluded. That's theft. He turned to Julia and gave a firm nod. Doug Hayes, Ryan Langford, terminated on the spot. Revoke all system access. Files will be transferred to legal for investigation and prosecution. Doug opened his mouth to object, but the stares from every employee silenced him. Ryan only bowed his head, quietly placed his ID card on the counter, and walked out without a word. Michael turned back and looked toward Emma. Would you come out here, please? Emma hesitated. She wasn't used to being called by name, much less being at the center of attention. But Michael's gaze held no pressure, only genuine respect, a willingness to listen. She stepped forward, each step like walking on ground that had just been returned to justice. For the first time, Emma stood in the center of the diner, not as someone erased from the system, not as someone forced to survive on coffee and silence. Today, she stood tall. No more bowed head, no more shrinking into the background. She didn't need a speech. She didn't need applause, because her presence alone in the morning light streaming through the windows was the loudest declaration. A real person, real work, real worth. And the truth always finds its way into the light. The diner was so silent that you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. But what Michael noticed most wasn't the silence. It was the gaze. From every corner of the room, from the young baristas hiding behind the espresso machine, from the girl in mid-step holding a half-open menu, even from the elderly chef leaning slightly out from the kitchen door, all of them were looking at Emma, not as someone who just avoided a lawsuit, but as someone who stood up for the part of them that had never dared to stand. An elderly guest set down his spoon and nodded slowly. A young mother pulled her son closer as he whispered, Mom, who is that lady? Emma didn't move. Her hands were no longer clenched. Her shoulders were no longer drawn tight from fear of being noticed. She looked up and for the first time, faced all those eyes fully. Michael stepped closer, not too close, not imposing, just close enough so no one would see her standing alone. Emma, he said, softly, slowly, like letting out a long-held breath. I'm sorry for letting this go on too long, and I'm grateful that you didn't leave. Emma turned to look at him, her eyes no longer tired but resolute, quietly strong. She shook her head gently. If I left, who would clean the burnt toast at table 8? Who would bring warm water to the gentleman at table 2? Who would say good morning with a real smile? Michael froze, That answer wasn't in any KPI sheet, not in the cash flow chart, but in people like her, those who had been erased from the system, yet were the very ones keeping this place alive each day. A young staff member stepped forward. It was Lila, the afternoon shift server. She handed Emma a small towel and murmured, "I saw you standing there so long, thought your hands might be cold." Emma accepted it. She bowed her head, thanking her in a soft voice. But this time, the whole diner could hear. Michael turned to face the entire team. He spoke briefly, but every word felt as though it were etched into the tiles beneath their feet. Starting today, Sunrise will never again let someone survive on coffee just to keep another person's dream alive. Starting today, no one will be excluded from access just for being quiet. He paused, looking straight into the eyes of the staff. And starting today, every single tip, every piece of feedback, every step between tables will be acknowledged. The espresso machine let out a soft hiss, like marking a new beginning. A few clapped, then all joined in. Not for Emma, but for what she represented: justice, being heard, a system rewritten by those who were once left out. Emma returned to the counter, no longer alone. And though no one said it aloud, everyone knew, that day, a single quiet step had shaken an entire system. 1 month later, the morning sky looked clearer, though no one could say for sure whether it was the sunlight or something deeper that had finally been set right. Michael Carter pulled up across the street, stepping out slowly. In his hands, no clipboard, no tablet. Today, he wasn't here to inspect. Today, he came for only one reason: to see that what's right can be preserved. The door to Sunrise Diner, branch number 28, swung open, and the wind chime gave a soft ring. The seating, the kitchen counter, the curtain colors, all remained the same. Yet something felt entirely reordered by something invisible: the order of justice. Right at the counter, a new digital display had been respectfully installed. The message didn't scroll quickly, but each line passed like a vow. Tip sharing policy. Transparent, public, protected. Just below, engraved into a panel of light oak wood, "You do the work, you deserve the credit." Emma stepped out from the kitchen, no longer hurried, no longer bearing the weary thinness that once haunted Michael's gaze. Today, she wore a simple white shirt. A brand new name tag gleamed on her chest. Emma Williams, branch manager. Her eyes sparkled, not from the title, but with the light of someone who has finally been heard. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, voice soft but steady. Michael nodded, not answering right away. He walked over to the table near the window, the same old table where, a month ago, he had once overheard a whisper so faint it could have vanished into the diner's background noise. Today, Emma herself brought him a hot cup of coffee. She didn't say a word, but her gaze held a message greater than any spoken greeting. "Thank you for not turning away." Michael lifted the cup, letting its warmth seep into his fingertips. Then he looked up at her and spoke, voice low, almost a whisper to himself. "The most important things in a restaurant aren't on the menu. They're trust, their dignity, and the courage to speak up, even when no one thinks your voice matters." Emma didn't answer. But when she sat down across the table, no longer timid, no longer needing an invitation, everyone in the diner understood. The person once erased from the system had now become the one preserving its very soul. Outside the window, a soft breeze stirred, sending a few tender leaves skittering across the glass. In that moment, the morning light reflected off the steaming cup of coffee, sealing the story with a silent but unmistakable symbol: a hot cup of coffee, poured by the right person, placed in front of the right person, at exactly the right time. And that was enough to remind us that justice doesn't always knock on the door. Sometimes it simply walks in. When someone is brave enough to leave the door open, not every voice is loud, but the courageous ones, even the smallest, can shift an entire system. One cup of coffee, one honest sentence, and an entire restaurant was changed. Because justice doesn't have to be loud, it only needs the right person to listen.